Hello, Mr. President. Thank you for your service. Thank you for making us understand with the problems of original shared internation problems with, in other words, facts treatments, the relationship to forced negotiations, natures of logic and treatments of law, relationship to original impositions. I want to beg you to communicate with the Supreme Court for me. This is what I want to ask. In relationship to old encyclopedias and with their treatments. I want to show the method, the organized crime method with linguistics. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a police officer, I'm not a criminal. But it's necessary for treatments to understand the natures and the way it was invested needs to obfuscate finite actively and how. That's an important thing that we understand because they put color with the law, and it's great to have that counter with such a perfect counter in the perfect man, um, the Barack Obama. I not don't knock you away. Of course, you know so much more than me, but with correlation, everybody you can see things that most there's this phenomenon where people get to see experience things that most people wouldn't be able to see because everybody knows the way they're looking at it. In other words, it was no joke. Colonizations, methods, terror laws, and shared, litigation laws with all nations now and modern. Like, look at Haiti. Look at those standards. Those are worse than terror laws. Let our infrastructure be, and no one sees a way out of it because I don't. Everyone is forced to entertain like there is stability just because it's in relationship to multi-front linguistic. In other words, too, we know that there's a nature of positive that is unchanging, about beyond us, and we know that the nature of positive is unchanging before and with the value of the finite. That's why, obviously, it's changing with perception and with communication and with value, relationships to that, where unchanging value is within that nature. That's why the radical of consciousness, an extreme range of its nature, and will not go beyond, is important for every religion. No forced industries, industries are the same criminally re-engineered campus marcias. This is what I believe for religion and per proofs of cipher that is deciphered in relationship to English and motivations for its active obfuscations and how. In other words, these are deep grounds. So I'm not saying just take the old dictionaries. I'm saying attach to them. Not, in other words, don't obfuscate things that are claimed prejudice. But the real motivations of it are demonstrable as criminal insidiousness caused by an archetypal criminal enterprise to juxtaposition of the only ones that realized, trained to the natures of legal natures. Now, I'm not saying they don't know more about me than me, but there's the proofs of correlation that demonstrate this is also related to their exploitations of of our regular service peoples, database relationships, even internal investigation natures and overall nature. Still, because it's related, there are proofs that's related to the nature of how we're forced to share legal nature agreements about facts treatments in relationship to business standards and shared policing of commodities forced on us originally with terror, not only left unexplained but insidiously explained, and with pathologically invested to stay insidiously explained in relationship to business agreements and treatments of American history that that glorify like for example, the Boston Tea Party, without explaining how they had to be counter extorted, and without explaining what with those with the theater, with colonization, terror laws, and the depths of it, with the terror of England too, and why and how they cheered us, and why and how that was only in relationship to how every nation was forced to share police in relation to Marxist positions. So there was fights about that in relationship to trying to free lands that were not were forced to those only that realized predatory litigation natures not by accident. In other words, there are proofs this is what religion is about. There's an organized crime method that by denaturing human education categorically, per a method that they affected human nature as a reaction natures perpetually in relationship to a method to stay all areas, not just with colonization, with surface. That's why they blame it on prejudice. That's why they still teach Native Americans to say that that is the white man. They don't let the sophistication of truth. In other words, they have to explain how we share police to all areas. In other words, in relationship to markets. Otherwise we have to explain how actively everybody lies and needs to, and to obfuscate who's trying to tell the truth about poverty's real impositions, about the war on poverty, about war itself. Demonstrably, they have our generals even only realized to self-defense natures in relationship to treatments of logic, where everyone's measuring each other out, but in relationship to physics, there's a negative value nature progression. No one was let to understand metaphysics, name dropping. These sciences are categorically obfuscated in relationship to the most sophisticated litigation natures we have, very sophisticated people. Them being only realized predatory litigation natures, complete ones, in relationship to what's actually causing these negative value nature progressions, and stay to as the actual evaluations of all the variables in relationship to tell the people that are hurting and getting hurt and getting hurt and going to courts and stuff like that, which is no joke. It's no fun. Takes your whole time, life away. It depends on what you're doing for your life. That's why they say job, because it's easy for them to explain it in relationship to a job, as business is told, as value nature system, which is a pathologically ill value nature system. You must understand with colonization would only let legal natures justify such and glorify such. That's why we have mistreatments of James Madison and the Rolls Count for extorting the people and setting up where everyone had to play counter theater while playing theater. Even James Madison too, he didn't have free speech because there was entrenchments here with the sciences. The kings and queens of Europe, they didn't have free speech. How do you know? Because no one protected ratiocination. That's what everybody wants. They don't want little fake gardens. They want it all real. Not just out of poverty in relationship to a game that is, in other words, everyone's an evidence fabrication nature to it in ways they don't understand. That's why we have laws. When there's certain things, when you try to report certain things, you're supposed to be able to. But then you try to ask, and they just say that, oh, whatever they say in the background, they call it, they say people that have met the problems by forging documents, pretending conversations. And then it gets worse because the way they all tell lies and defend each other. Then they have to. Then the people know how they can, if you don't defend me when they're in trouble, so they make up lies and go further into trouble. In other words, when the relationship to what's really been sustaining the internation The internation, interscience, the drug problems, the sabotage to the war on poverty, the war the war that's actively exploiting the finite through the exploited, and in relationship to reaction nature's forced to all politicians by their parties, natures too, to all areas, not by accident. They try to you make a law to punish out things from kids and stuff like that. That's not, in other words, you didn't teach them. You're talking about bullying, you're talking about political theater. You're not talking about real unchanging positive. There's many ways that, in other words, think about it. You have narratives admitting you have juxtapositions of organized crimes with your schools. Well, in other words, known criminal enterprises. And then you have everyone exploiting average over because you can't put everyone in jail for the way the logic of everyone. You're right, though. But that same logic is, in other words, it's multi-front. This is in nature where there's many police forms, and there's all kinds of, in other words, this narrative is being forced to entertain one form of police, not to look at the details. In other words, it's colonization, not by accident. We lost on many fronts in the American Revolution. It's not in relationship to England. That's colonization too, using the sciences, forcing evidence fabrication. Nature's incapable of the proper facts treatments necessary to defend ourselves in complex litigation in relationship to human nature impositions. That's why they go after radical Islam. That talks down to the predatory states leaderships. And they don't want to admit that, but while they're blaming everything on lies and delusions, they're trying to hurt people. They don't even understand what's behind like these narratives with people like swatting and stuff like that. I heard it called swatting, where they call up and bring the police. In other words, where they have investigations, where they have with the kids. Forget about having that industry internation. You have to understand colonization with terror prisons. Imagine that. Forget it. Witch trials. I mean, forget the obvious things like slavery, all the laws with that, and database relationships. That's scary not only that's everybody's slavery. When we do it, who's going to tie your time to them? They're tying everybody and measuring everybody as evidence fabrication natures. Joseph Mengele, when he lines up, and they promote about how he lined up Jewish people to do medical experiments on them. I was in relationship to measure relationship to who would come in and investigate this. This is the method of this nature of organized crime from time between nations. In other words, the facts treatments. See, they make it all about the general guy. They don't make it about the complex litigation nations rules with it. Never. And we don't have the facts treatments necessary. We have them with roles forcing that's a glorified, insidiously, lies about American history, obfuscating the actual cause of James Madison and of America and of actual history. Just by unchanging truth, unchanging positive is only changing always. It doesn't matter how invested you are to lie and need to say, oh, that's just the past. That's why the past is remember the past is because why we write it to understand this education reveals it actively in demonstration to us. As we lose it, we lose everything because that's evolution. This education. And when it goes away, de-evolution, evolution only comes back from that point. So down here, you just keep going away. In other words, humanity's wrecking the earth. Humanity's nothing special. we're going away, being taking the Earth's value away, and that's the good that will stay to be positive value nature somewhere else, and we're going to be negative value nature relationship to. That's what is more logical in relationship to these interpretations of the religions that even juxtaposes the one God with the plausibility of the Indian religion with the multi gods being the same thing. In other words, but multi-front counters to what obfuscated and criminally re-engineered ancient revelations, ancient, in other words, sciences, scientific looks on reality. See, but we have lies and illusions being forced as to conversations about these religions only let realize. The Quran warns about this. Try to have a conversation about specific truths in the Quran, and they want to debate counters to the laws related to Saudi Arabia's defenses of the physical body, but not in sequence nature, not dealing with the front of it first, and not dealing with the nature of its relationship to organized crime with the nature of our agencies, the predatory litigation nature roles with colonization, with original breaching negotiations, terror negotiations, which stayed breached. George Washington only did a retreat, and it was like same thing with England, with General Clinton, but it was them fighting themselves as theater, but as forced theater in relationship to what couldn't blame them for what would have turned all the nations on them. In other words, what manipulates the nations like puppets that criminally re-engineered human education. Now it has human nature as evidence fabrication natures, not naturally, per criminal, not just per criminal persuasions, but per layers of it, all connected. So we have natures of organized crime acts. I'm not a police officer, I'm not a criminal, I'm not a lawyer. But this is what colonization was. This is what made the evil with colonization's terror laws, like acts and natures, which is everything. See, everyone focuses on the slave, the guy with the whip, which was an evil dude. He got, well, that's a person that belongs in jail. But why? Because the legal natures were putting that there. And see, they were putting it there with theater too. In other words, not only were they forcing the guy to do that, but they were incentivizing him to do that, and only letting him realize as an animal for the education. In other words, he's a victim too. But first, that's why he's an animal, the guy. But in other words, you don't teach it in relationship to physics. You always put physics first, metaphysics first, because that's closer to that's in order first in relationship to the sequence nature of truth, which is unchanging, positive, and demonstration to us always. That's where we all seek the truth. Because the nature is common. We have the common shared positive, only unchanging positive nature of identity. The body is something different. That's only temporary value nature. And that's a random, and could be anything too, in demonstration to us of the body of correlation, radical, for correlation in relationship to a nature of law that is unchanging positive. In other words, not in relationship to negotiations with hundreds of nations that have time impositions and terror impositions stacked more than there are hours in the day. So our leaders want to say that. They want to say, they'll understand that these surface terrors are forcing us from from the time and positions, from the time necessary to defend ourselves from what holds us incapable of reaching the potentials that to help other nations properly. In other words, we don't have proper facts treatment. That's demonstrated by the standards in Haiti and in Africa. And because everyone's got only let realized by geopolitical sciences, criminally re-engineered human education, wanting to make illusion of differences, all to the array of one human captive nature, value nature system. This is the value nature. It's a linguistic virus. God help us. So easy. The answer is right here. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying about two. We should be able to ask the courts, because, in other words, not because of prejudice, but because of the natures of the organized crime and all the hurt with that, and all the forsaken, actively exploited poverty with the lost war on poverty and why and how. In other words, like let's start examining how, by at least artistically giving them the reliefs can we have an injunctive relief to give them a huge set of a standardized set of encyclopedias that explain the nature of logic and the nature of criminal insidiousness woven to the narratives with the past. See, that's what they're using the narratives. That's one motivation for pretending to care about prejudice, to wipe out, to obfuscate the proofs that we need from the books. You see what I'm saying? There are motivations to force and pretend top-down lies justifiable. Only let them realize the unaccosted opinions in relationship to the internet policing too, in relationship to its nature, the areas too. They send people online to make people feel uncomfortable. You know what I mean, about talking about proofs that police know that all kinds of police forms have rights to lie. But we've missed how this has a relationship to how we lost in many fronts in revolution. No, but we didn't lose. In other words, we stayed waiting for free speech to defend us. But everyone gave that up because we lost on campus fronts. We lost on, that was where we lost. So in other words, we didn't even have legal natures capable of defending what they were only let realize, trained to defend themselves as logic, and with indifferences, and with all that tied to it. So then self-defense natures of that are too many time impositions in the relationship to everything else. So everything just stays stuck and everyone stays blind, justifying. That's when differences with linguistics, with human convictions, hurt and difference natures, evidence fabrication natures, only let realized. That's what. So in other words, we want an even bigger set, and we want, them paid for people who need them the most. We're going to expand. In other words, we'll look at this as human scaffolding in a deep-natured landscape, and bottom up, we're going to force evolution. In other words, then nothing. That's totally tied to the landscape, but it's also the policing nature and all that tied to that, to all areas first, before with all these litigation natures only realized, tricked, glorified, self-defended, self-defeating psychologies, breach psychology, captive Oz, the nation's generals, all because they're all top-down, most sophisticated legal natures, because they're how the sciences were engineered to only let every nation stay Oz in relationship to this, needing them to blame it on money. Then now you don't understand. Then, and why you don't understand, the money is led to intellectually. No one's defend. Real science, honest science, reveals exactly how bottom up. Everyone else is stay real. We're gonna come. You know what I'm saying? And In other words, this is where the money goes. I don't want the money for the books. I want, like, we'll figure out. I'll probably get, if YouTube doesn't make money for me, then I'll figure out. I'm gonna be famous for for not just for asking the courts. Well, they'll be famous for that if they do that. They should. I would if I would just go. Take all those books they got rich on them. Now give them to the not even let's standardize education because that's actively tied to what's actively exploiting those left in the war on poverty and with linguistic fronts. It's a great hurt teach people that white people did that. That was a minority of foreign legal natures for only letting realize predatory human nature with sciences. They had slavery in all these cultures. That's why, because they're playing a game with the laws since ancient times. So in other words, just everyone will. I'll do the English. Anyone can do it. Who's not going to give a standardized education? In other words, we have to do it. In other words, explain what we, and that's just one thing. In other words, actively do something. Force standards. That's what law. You force. You just say, man, that's no good. And you take it out of you see that's where they have that multi-side, both capitalism and communism. They shared predatory litigation nature treatments of facts and of morality and of care for humanity with those litigation natures in relationship to exploitations of how we have business pretending it's stable when they don't have the bomb problem figured out yet. What keeps us on the edge of that? In other words, no one's allowed to talk about that, overcome that. All if they do is set up connections. They don't want that. They want connections all tied to these crazy narratives. And while they're actively exploiting. So it's not the war on poverty is war on us all. We're measured tool evidence fabrication natures not attending to that and in relationship to that. So we're in relationship to other things, just judging by that. We're tool in relationship what plays us through the methods. You see, no one sees motivations for criminal and means that were stayed to all areas to stay this way. Everyone to type things and concept contained not by accident to group things. They're someone else's term. It's all expert lean, but that's worse than that. So in other words, instead of sitting here and everybody complaining, we make New York game. If we could overcome the New York poverty and connect it to a method that's doing it actively with the other cities at the same time and doing it actively with the world, we can do it. All we have to do is understand that's it. We realize we're all broke and stop blaming individuals and types and all that and just deal with the finite. See, then even if you're right, in other words, it is prejudice leaving the streets forsaken. It is prejudice. But saying it's prejudice and making that a movement that is also tied to what's exploiting it actively and obfuscating what's actively exploiting it. For example, in relationship to proper facts treatments with the law and with standards and with morality. It's not by accident no one's left to have voice and to stay on the illusion of the dream of business that failed, of sciences that failed. Science has failed, not human nature, naturally. Science has failed because of criminal persuasions that were legalized. In other words, that's what happened in ancient times. That's what religions are saying. What is now legal was criminally legalized, and it was only realized trained to the self-defense nature of itself. And it was hurt, because hurt conviction natures are cultivated to all areas, not just against minorities. Every single person who's not blind, people get hurt by this, because that's why there's the problem with school bullying. It's more complicated. It's a method. It's a method to the maintenance of live progressions in relationship to all using our campuses. This is related to the progressions with the shootings on campuses, and with the nature of the campuses, and it's in relationship to their adaptations from old natures of roles with this, not realizing, only like realized, glorified even the nature of police, originally breached and shared in this breaching, but they can't talk about it per se, sanctions, obviously. Otherwise, we're policing it alone, and then we're making mistakes that way too. Then, see, that's ridiculous. We need to have American history. Very simple. We also need cartoons to explain American history. In other words, it's very simple. And then we show how they knew that people, and with this nature, with these retreat nature, time and nature, energy nature, people are still going to need to socialize. Now it's going to have to be part of, because they have no, it's too much of a headache. I forgot what was connected. There's a lot. It's not by accident. It's everybody's an evidence fabrication nature, linguistic-wise, in relationship to what is shared by all nations. No one understands how, because it maintains the means to this through our nature, to our areas, in relationship to the sciences. It's not by accident. It's not just through the science. It was to the areas, all areas, per methods that leaves it per peripheral interest to need to cover live progressions from the past to all areas as well. In other words, for example, that's really why they can't justify active exploitations of poverty without obfuscating the actual the actual cause of James Madison, the actual roles of him with the Constitutional Convention, the actual fears of those guys to do that, how they were counter-extorted, what extortion is. Extortion is something that takes place, is caused by criminal enterprises. Because could be caused by other things too. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a police force, I'm not a criminal. But internation organized crimes, internation criminal enterprises, which juxtapose organized crime, they use extortion, and they use extortion methods not only individually but grouped, juxtaposed to our areas, and how they get away with it is how they're juxtaposed to with interbranch legal natures, which are only realized as offensive predatory litigation natures, evidence fabrication natures, evidence sequence natures, in relationship to actual legal nature, which remains forsaken. Literally, that's exactly why we lost the war on poverty. We didn't lose by accident, stay breached. So we lost a war, we lost a revolution. We didn't lose a revolution until we lost it by ignoring things like this, with indifferences, with opinions, in relationship to the sciences, in relationship to the opinions of experts who have the phenomenon of more facts, but they don't have the first fact. James Madison with the Constitutional Convention, they don't have that. So you don't have anything. You have nothing. You have worse than nothing. You have your evidence fabrication nature in relationship to that point, and take it out of context and treat it with the rest of the laws. So when they come to what Marbury versus Madison is supposed to mean, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a police foreman, I'm not Marbury versus Madison means real justice satisfies real justice always. It's because unchanging positive is unchanging positive always. You see what I'm saying? Real justice is a radical that correlation's mission is to understand, to be. It's progression. It's progressive value. Because space nature is a progressive value for itself. How do we know this? Without delusion, which other things are only a force to let realize, without delusion, we know that there's more value gaining. So we don't know the extent of it, but we know that. So that's what science is. Leave that the point for correlation. We don't play these games. Oh, well, that's blind shared guides for science, for treatments of the facts. Someone says police are doing something wrong, you respond. You know what I'm saying? Because it's not just police, and it's not just since beginning of time. Our military didn't have before the World War I. They had northern, southern roles with slavery still being obfuscated by the same litigation natures that took us into these wars and had France extorted, the little nation, relationship to what's an internation common enemy. You can't point and beat it out of a person, you can't point and beat or an area, or you can't point and beat it out of a nation or the species. The only way you can do it is by revealing the proper nation of the sciences. The proper nature of the sciences, which is ratiocination nation, stand. Who'll understand the New York game? We go right to correlation. The harder it is, the better. You don't even understand. We'll start writing books. Well, own the books. Now, in other words, the landscapes own it. The human standards own it. Once the bottom standards go up, everyone's standards go up because we're all going to learn the perfect education. Because only what's true always. No more of this nonsense. Indifference to everything. And how. Why. Relationship to investments positions. We have to understand investment nature in 9 to 5. And the original positions, forsaken in positions not understood. We need our book. We need our method. The book is a method. Ratiocination is a method to let go of everything we don't know completely. I mean, in other words, always. Even if someone knows more than us, if we know they know something wrong, that makes what they're saying impossible, then it's impossible. See, but with this top-down logic, you can't judge what's possible and impossible because the finite's not being let. Force, respect for police that are only let breach in per natures of each of our branches. All kinds of police forms, court police forms, to all areas. We have standards, justifications with morality that fail to explain colonization's terror with the prisons because we have still natures of logic associated with it today actively. So they can't make the words. But they're the only ones who are allowed to. Predatory litigation natures. What's that mean? That means the people that litigate the law, that can contain it. The real law is the guardian. That's what these religions are saying. If these people understood law, there would be no problems. And the sciences would be self-perfecting, and we'd understand what a radical is. We'd understand how and why James Madison was the founder of this nation, the founding father. in metaphysics first. Then George Washington is his brother, his first bailiff in the Constitutional Convention. Not they all came to with pride. They all came with fear. Why? Because what was already entrenched here in the nation. And why? How? And what, by what? For what methods? They didn't understand. They didn't understand the methods. They just understood the counter. That all we know, even though it's being obfuscated by 4 summary convictions, all we know, a method that James Madison led, counter extortion, the force, the terror, what they were afraid to do the Boston Tea Party and have the means to leverage such for a nation to fight with itself in relationship to all the nations that shared policing of market positions that set the world up. To think it was for money, and to claim it that, even by the legal natures, they don't understand because they're defending lies and delusions in relationship to sciences, and that connects to treatments of facts, and that contains murderously ill indifferences to moral compromises, stayed active. That's why we lost the war on poverty. That's no joke. These aren't just words. Religion, tribe, is trial tribes. The way's right there. The answer is yet not let try. So I'll call it prejudice. That's top-down lies. It's worse than that. It's prejudice, but it needs it to be called that. One thing it is evidence fabrication. It's evidence fabrication natures, it's evidence fabrication methods, and it's evidence fabrication methods and needs affected beyond affecting it on that, beyond that. That's the problem. Evidence fabrication is true always. That's the problem, not prejudice. See the difference when we say evidence fabrication nature? Now we go right into the finite of what's actively exploiting our schools and our morality with human standards. And we say, well, that's just the laws and the zoning law. Exactly. Well, there's divided business. That's because there's divided business because we still left forsaken losses and on fields and fronts with the mind and with our kids and with inter-campuses, inter-community, inter-city. And no one realizes it because everyone's self-defending type, preach, none have teach, stage. In other words, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil can't correlate. You can hide all. You can know about all these things. But if you tell a lie and there's a means to correlate, you can tell the truth. You can see a truth beyond that. You can see wisdom beyond that in relationship to actual moralities, words, and needs. And all that needs to be done is spoken, taught, and understood. You can't. You make a law, no one hears. No, the people who are being hurt. Before they hurt someone, they don't hear that laws are being made, or even if they do, but they don't understand because of what's actually exploiting them under the name of maturity, or under the name of, we're so backward in so many ways, evidence fabrication natures to all areas. However you understand it, that's what evidence fabrication, that's the problem that lost the war on poverty. And no one can admit that, even though proofs of it are there. And not only cannot admit that, all the people with the interests and needs to keep it not addressed in the front of the mind because they're actively exploiting it, those interests, it's worse than that to all areas. BS. It means body sees, but only correlation sees.